The following program contains the opinions of the host, guests, and call-in participants. These do not necessarily represent the views of this show's distributors or sponsors. This program may contain obscene, profane, or otherwise objectionable language. Viewer discretion is advised. Yes, coming to you cordless, everybody, and it feels so good, doesn't it? It's Thursday night, February 27th, 2025. It's 9 p.m. on the East Coast of the United States, 6 p.m. on the West Coast, 8 a.m. in Singapore, 12 noon in Sydney, Australia, and here where I'm sitting in Northeast Minneapolis, it's 8 p.m. Central Time. I am Jim Peters, and welcome to another edition of Jim Peters at Night. This is episode number 202, if you're keeping score at home. And yeah, we're getting it done. I got big hair tonight. Did you see this? Look at this. I don't know how that happened. I'm getting cut tomorrow. Brittany Shears, famous Minneapolis salon woman, is going to cut my hair. I'm starting to think maybe I actually don't need it cut. I don't know. Maybe I like it big. I don't know. Call me up and tell me what you think. So here's the deal. We do the show in two parts if you've never seen it before. First part, after I get done yakking here and making a couple announcements, we have an interview tonight. It's with MURRAY Sabrin, economist extraordinaire, the emeritus professor of finance at Ramapo College I kind of like saying that, Ramapo College in New Jersey. And we're going to talk about, there's been a couple of things that have been written recently. Matter of fact, another one came out tonight after we did the interview. We taped the interview in the afternoon about how Biden's economy did not go well. And there's some debate, and Murray and I will talk about this, about whether it was incompetence or severe miscalculation. In other words, they might have had some planning involved here. It might not have been incompetence, but they planned wrong. Well, whatever. That's what we're going to talk about. And okay, I'm going to tell you about why you need to listen to this, because nobody in America, we live in the most capitalist country on earth, the richest country in the history of humanity, and virtually nobody in America knows anything about money. It's unbelievable. We don't teach regular macroeconomics, just basic economics, even in high school, which is absurd. I mean, I don't know if they still do. We used to have home ec, they used to teach cooking in high school, but money, no, we don't teach that. God knows you shouldn't know anything about that. Now they're going to go off into the world and, probably make over the course of your life, you're probably going to make roughly $1 million. That's even at, if you're the average salary in America is now $65,000. So, and you shouldn't know anything. That's the reason I put Murray on. I'd actually like to, and no offense to Murray, I'd actually like to get some more economists coming on for some different points of view, because you need to hear about this stuff. So I was having trouble. In my early 30s, I was having really trouble making a living. I was. And I said this last night. We were talking about something else. I can't remember what we were talking about the fact that, I've been fired at least a dozen times for all sorts of reasons. Half the time, maybe it was justified. Half the time, it wasn't. I just got screwed, whatever, And I didn't know anything about economics. And I thought, well, maybe I should start reading about this. And I did start reading about it. And I started, even the most basic stuff. And then I realized, well, no, nobody knows anything about this. Nobody. It's unbelievable. Like I'm going to go off here. It's okay. The biggest signal fallacy about capitalism is that there's a static pie of money. In other words, the pie is cut. Everybody gets a piece. And if your piece is bigger, that means someone along the line gets a smaller piece. That's complete crap. That's totally untrue. That's not the way it works at all. So, just that alone, that's the biggest single misconception about capitalism. That's wrong. And so it starts from there. So, at any rate, Murray's our guest. I want to tell you about the weather here because I live in Minnesota and it's the most fascinating weather on earth because it's really hot and really cold. And so winter's here. I've told you in the past, usually in January here in Minneapolis, we get about 2 or 3 days where the high is about 20 below zero. It's really, really brutal. It's terrible. Like, but that's 2 or 3 days, and sometimes we don't get them. Now we had a couple days this January last month that was true. The problem here is that over the last 2 weeks, I took 2 weeks off to help my mother, and she's doing very well. Thank you. And by the way, I want to thank seriously some of you who wrote me and asked me, and give her my wishes, give her your wishes, and I have. I appreciate that a lot. I really do. She's 100 years old. She's 4'10". Uh, she's never been like fat. She still has her figure at 100, and she's healing just fine. And it's like she'll live forever. Yeah, but at any rate, so we have 2 or 3 days a year where the weather's really really cold. But this last 2 weeks, ending on Sunday, this last Sunday, we had 2 weeks in a row, 18 days in a row, where the windshield did not crack zero, and it was cold. I mean, that's okay. So we might not be talking about 10, 20 below, but we're talking about 8 below, 5 below. I mean, and this is like 2 weeks in a row. It was awful. And then Sunday rolls around, it's 40 degrees. And then Monday rolls around, it's 50. Now we've had 4 days in a row, well into the 50s, and it's not even March yet. On Sunday, we had a half a foot of snow on the ground. Now it's completely gone. Totally. We have no snow here in Minneapolis at all. Nowhere. Nothing. And it was 55 degrees again today. It's going to be about 50 tomorrow. Supposedly it's going to go down to about 35 on Saturday, but it's going to go back up. I don't know if spring's here. I don't. I love it because I do not like the cold weather, and I'm starting to think I'm an idiot for moving back here. I am. So anyway, that's my weather report. So I made a couple announcements last night about the fact that we have a change of policy. We have changed our policy. We are no longer doing shows if we don't have a guest. So next week, no guest on Monday, so no show. Tuesday, Marcus Loth, who's the editor-in-chief of UFO Insight magazine and website, he's going to be joining us as our guest. He is, our friend Jazz Shaw passed away in October. He's well missed by a lot of people. He was a really good guy, and he was our go-to UFO guy here. And I think Marcus I'll be just blunt here. Marcus kind of wants to take his place, and I'm batting for him. We're going to see how this goes. Marcus's writing on UFOs is everywhere. I mean, I'm starting to, now that I've booked him and I've been interacting with him, I see it even when I'm not looking for it. I mean, it's like I'm not even looking. I mean, I'm just astonishing. His writing is everywhere, and so this is going to be a fairly long interview because he's got a lot to say. So I'm looking forward to that. Wednesday, Jeff Myers, CEO of Kong News, is going to be joining us for his monthly visit, and we'll talk about business and politics with him. I have a guest for Thursday. I don't want to announce it yet, but because I haven't confirmed it. But yeah, we should have a show on Thursday too. So that's what's going on. Now, the other thing I announced last night too is that I'm thinking of trying as an experiment starting next week about us starting the show on the live version an hour earlier. That would be at 8 p.m. Central. No, 8 p.m. Eastern, 5 p.m. Pacific, and 7 p.m. Central. Now I'm starting to know. I don't know if we're going to do that because it's not that I'm that indecisive. Is stuff's coming in. And getting feedback from various people, including my wife, and I don't know if I'm starting to know maybe this might not be a good idea. So I don't know yet. And the thing is, even if we did this, it would only be as an experiment. So if we did it for a couple of weeks, then I decide are we going to keep it permanently or go back. So I don't know yet. I just don't know. We might do the experiment later on too, like in a couple of weeks we might start. But at any rate, that's what's going on here. So now our interview with Murray is pre-recorded, and we're going to come back with part 2, and I'll take your phone calls at 325 call Jim. You can't forget that number, 325 call Jim, and then we'll do some wild and wacky news, and maybe you call in. Okay, that's 325-225-5546. I'm going to leave the scroll on the bottom of the screen, even though we're not taking calls during the interview, but still, so you get it through your head that you can call in and insult me. So at any rate, yeah, that's so. Yeah, we got it going on. So, we're going to do a commercial. When we come back, Murray Sabrin. Just a minute. Stay tuned, please. Joining us from his home in Naples, Florida, economist extraordinaire, professor emeritus at Ramapo College. I pronounced that correctly. In New Jersey, professor of finance, Murray Sabrin joins us. Hi, Murray. How you doing?
Great to be with you, Jim. I hear you're getting some warm weather up your way.
Yes, we are. And we were just talking just before we went on the air now. You were talking about the difference between climate and weather. And, here's my thing, Murray. It's like everyone tries to simplify everything, and the thing is, like, you deal with economics. It's a fairly complex subject, and I would say it's both an art and a science, and people and climate change and everything. It's like we're trying to get the whole world down into 25 words or less, and some things just don't work that way, do they?
Well, the thing is, the Earth has been around for what, 5 billion years, and they've had periods of ice ages. Minnesota, where you are, was covered in what, a mile of ice of what, 20, 40,000 years ago. Then it receded, and that's how we got the Great Lakes and all the different mountain ranges in North America. So the Earth has been evolving because of natural forces, and it has nothing to do with human activity.
That's correct. Are you familiar with the driftless area? Do you know what that is, Murray?
No.
It's a small part of southern Minnesota and western Wisconsin that was not covered by the glaciers. It's a very small part, but the hometown I'm from is in that area. It's very unusual because it's completely different than the rest of the topography. So it's only like a couple hundred square miles. It's very small, but yeah, it was not covered by the glaciers.
But it's fascinating. The whole history of the Earth, from the topography, geology, is a subject I didn't study as an undergraduate. I just took some geography courses, but you get to learn in geography courses about some of the topography and what caused it. And so people need to look at good science, and there are some really good books out. You have the CO2coalition.org, which has scientists from around the world explaining that CO2 is not a danger to the human civilization.
The lack of it is,
Yeah, well, that's it. I mean, people don't realize that if you get rid of CO2, you kill vegetation. When you kill vegetation, you kill off the human race.
That's right. I had Patrick Moore on this show about a year ago. It's the single most watched episode of this series, and he explained that we're at 400 parts per million CO2 on the globe right now. If we get below 150, everything dies. And we're actually in a low period. It's usually been higher over most of Earth's existence. So no, I just like, and so like we were talking before, economics is basically both an art and a science. I mean, it's like, and you can't simplify it down to 25 words. Now, the reason I asked you to come on today, two things. You wrote basically a rebuttal to an editorial on your Substack about the constitutional, the supposed constitutional crisis. And simultaneously, a guy named Jason Furman, who I was not familiar with, but apparently is considered a liberal economist, wrote I wouldn't say a scathing, but a detailed description of why Bidenomics failed. And so his basic thing is that, well, first of all, they flooded the money, the market with worthless money, and for some reason they didn't think inflation was going to happen. I don't quite understand. So, can you explain this to us? It's like,
I think it's pretty simple. In order to have general price inflation, which is what we're talking about, which spiked at a 9% annual rate in June of 2022. The money supply had to increase prior to that. And that's exactly what happened during COVID. The Federal Reserve dropped interest rates to close to 0% and created trillions of dollars of new money, which is available to see on the Federal Reserve database that the St. Louis Fed puts out. And you have this wonderful chart showing the huge increase in the money supply, M2, which is the broad definition of money, cash, checking accounts, money market accounts, savings accounts. And that increased dramatically because the federal government under Trump was sending out all these checks to people, trillions of dollars worth of checks, to quote, cover the shortfall from the COVID lockdowns. So you have the federal government writing checks, creating huge deficits, and the Federal Reserve stepped in. So when they say they're independent, they're really not. They basically were enabling the federal government to flood the economy with checks that had to be borrowed.
Murray, they've never really been independent, have they? That's just BS,
no,
right?
Not really. That's the narrative that they try to sell to the American people, that they're independent of what the federal government does. But that's not true. We saw that during the Nixon administration when he imposed wage price controls in August of 1971, and the Federal Reserve pumped the money supply up in order to help Nixon get elected, because Arthur Burns, the chairman of the Fed, was a good friend of Nixon from the Eisenhower days when Nixon was vice president and Arthur Burns was chairman of the Council of Economic Advisors. Fast forward to the late 1970s, and Jimmy Carter installed G. William Miller, who was probably clueless about monetary policy, and the Federal Reserve flooded the economy with money, and that's how we got the double-digit inflation of the late 70s and early 80s. Yeah. And so the Federal Reserve claims to be independent, but they basically do what the president wants. Now, you had some conflict with Chairman Powell and Trump in 2018 when the Federal Reserve was raising interest rates, and Trump got very upset, and he called Powell out, and interest rates started going down, and then they went up again, and they went down again. So the Federal Reserve's manipulation of interest rates, and that's what you have to call it. It's manipulation on a grand scale that should not be part of a free economy, of a free society, of a limited government situation in Washington. And so the Federal Reserve has a mandate to keep inflation low and unemployment low. Well, you don't need the Federal Reserve manipulating interest rates to achieve that. All you need is have a free market, because the free market will give us the output of goods and services that the people want through their buying and refraining from purchasing goods and services. So you have, on the one hand, a natural economy of people making decisions about their preferences. Then you have the federal government spending money like crazy, running up huge deficits, and then you have the Federal Reserve keeping interest rates artificially low with what's called open market operations, which is basically their way of creating money by buying bonds from the banking system, which then increases the reserve of the banking system so they can lend more money. And that's what gives us the boom-bust cycle, which I wrote about in my book, Navigating the Boom-Bust Cycle, and Why the Federal Reserve Sucks. So I've written 2 books about how counterproductive the Federal Reserve is, and there have been other books like Rothbard's What Has Government Done to Our Money, which is available free at the Mises Institute, the Mises.org. Everyone should read that. It's more than 60 years old, and it's more relevant today than it was back in 1963 when we had 1% inflation in the Kennedy administration. And the Federal Reserve is, in effect, the great destabilizer of the economy. And most economists think that it's necessary to, quote, stabilize the economy. But that is one of the great economic myths of modern America, because the history of the Federal Reserve is awful. Since it was created, the value of the dollar has declined by more than 95% since 1971, when Nixon closed the gold window. Prices are up, or I should say, the value of the dollar has gone down by 80%, which means prices are up about 800% since 1971. So the economy works well when there's no interference from government. That is not only economic theory, but economic history. And so when you study theory and history, you have to come to the conclusion, if the federal government or the national government spends more money than it takes in, you can have deficits, which causes distortions in the economy and sucks up resources that would otherwise be available to the private sector for capital formation, which is the foundation of prosperity. Without capital formation, we'd all be living in mud huts and a subsistence food supply.
Like half the other countries on the planet do, because they don't
Well,
have.
that's it. Just look at Africa. Just look at the lack of capital in Africa.
I know.
And other third world countries, and the great achievement around the world of countries that have gone from third world status to first world status, which would be Singapore, Taiwan, and South America. Some of the countries in South America were backward, and now they're trying to. Chile is a good example of that. They introduced more market reforms there. East Europe, they did the same thing. And once you have a market economy, then you have resources allocated, as economists would say, to their best and highest use, which is the free market. And what is the free market? It's basically people making their choices to achieve their goals. That's the simple definition of a free market. So if you're opposed to that, if you are a Bernie Sanders, AOC knucklehead on economics, then you don't believe in people achieving their goals through voluntary exchange, which is the essence of a free economy and a free society.
I don't even understand. Can you tell me, like, about Bernie and AOC? What is their rational basis for their opinion? I don't even see it at this point. I don't understand it.
Well, it's basically comes from a Marxist perspective that you've got to have a top-down economy where the government is allocating resources. I mean, to say that healthcare is a right, it's certainly not in the Bill of Rights. The rights that we have are negative rights. Government shall not infringe on people, whether it's the First Amendment, the Second Amendment, the Fourth Amendment. That's what rights mean. It means the government is restrained from interfering with our peaceful existence. It's as simple as that. And so that's why the founders, at least the people that said, hey, we have this constitution, but we really need protection for the people against an intrusive government. That's how the Bill of Rights came about. And if we just implemented the Bill of Rights and Article 1, Section 8 of the Constitution, which I write about constantly, which talks about the authorized activities of the federal government. If you look at spending, which I posted in my recent Substack, if you look at spending, virtually none of it is authorized by the Constitution.
Well, and that's exactly what I was going to ask you about, because in your counter editorial, you were talking about the real constitutional crisis is the fact that the federal government spends money it's not supposed to. As far as I know, correct me if I'm wrong, the only thing in the Constitution that the federal government is actually authorized to spend money on is the military. Am I right about that?
It also talks about post roads, which is a minor thing if you accept that. But there's nothing there about healthcare, education, energy. Even trade is problematic with all these tariffs, because the way that trade should work is that it's people trading in different parts of the world, just as we trade internally between different people in different states. We don't have that regulated by the federal government as much as we have it regulated by international trade. So let trade be an example of free enterprise where people exchange money for goods or money for services, not only domestically, but internationally. That is a laissez-faire free market economy where you have people achieving their goals instead of trade restrictions, which benefits some people at the expense of others. And that is really the essence of what Bernie Sanders and AOC believe in. They think that people who have high incomes have achieved it through nefarious ways. That's why they call it greed. I don't use the word greed because it's a politically laden term. Everyone tries to achieve their goals. The question is, how do you achieve your goals? Do you do it peacefully, or do you use coercion? The people who use coercion are called criminals. They're robbers. They're hackers. They're thieves. And then you have the government is doing the same thing, but they have a legal a mandate to do so with tax policy and regulatory policy and spending policy. But they basically do the same thing as criminals do. And so Bastiat, in his classic monograph, The Law, he said, see if the government does that we, the people, cannot do. I can't tax you, so therefore taking money from you without your permission is illegal. But the government does it. It's called taxation.
Murray, what about you were talking about laissez-faire capitalism? What about the reciprocal tariffs? If some country is going to charge us tariffs, is it worthy that we charge them the same tariff back just to keep them from doing it?
Well, that's like cutting off your nose to spite your face. That's like saying, well, someone's beating their spouse, so therefore I'll beat my spouse, so this way we'll have a level playing field. No, what Trump should do, Jim, is very simple. He should reduce taxes. In fact, what I call for in the essay I just wrote for a book that's coming out at the end of this year or beginning of next year is how we can get rid of the income tax completely.
Well,
and not replace it with a tariff. But
he's playing with this idea, from what I understand, right?
Well, the problem that Trump has is that he doesn't have a very good perspective, because he says William McKinley's his hero because he imposed high taxes and the economy was great. No, it wasn't. The economy was great because we didn't have a central bank manipulating interest rates. We didn't have a big welfare state. We didn't have a big warfare state. Government spending was minuscule, so you could support government spending with a tariff back in the late 1800s, early 1900s. And so you can't do that today. You'd have to raise trillions of dollars via tariff, which means that tariffs would have to be like 300-400% on imported goods, because I think we import, I don't know, a couple of $1 trillion of goods every year. And so you'd have to have a huge tariff to do that if you want to get rid of the income tax. But then you have the payroll taxes, Social Security, and Medicare taxes. So my proposal in my article, and I just condensed it, and hopefully that'll get published soon, is that you have this grand bargain where we get rid of the income tax, and wealthy people go off of Medicare and Social Security, and even middle income people, because they wouldn't be taxed on interest, dividends, and capital gains. So I did some calculations. The average family would be much better off, retirees, if they had that, and also people who are working would be much better off also, as they would use that Social Security and Medicare money to build up retirement accounts for healthcare costs in the future, and retirement.
So you're basically proposing is saying in different words. Tell me if I'm wrong about this. You're saying in different words the thing I've been proposing for quite a while, and that is, instead of Social Security, we should have true social insurance where everybody pays in a little bit to start, but you only collect at the end if you need it. Because you're right, wealthy people don't need their Social Security. They don't.
Well, the big great myth is that people, quote, paid into the system. Well, your Social Security account is just that. It's a digital account. It's not real money. Your IRA and your 401k are real assets that you buy, stocks, bonds, ETFs, whatever that you can put into and that you own it. You don't own Social Security. That's the big difference. Social Security is really an intergenerational chain letter. In other words, if we didn't have a separate Social Security tax or a Medicare tax, and the government says, once you reach age 65 or 66, whatever, we're going to give you a benefit based upon your lifetime earnings, that would mean that's a welfare payment when you retire. And that's exactly what it is, except that we have a, quote, a dedicated tax for the Social Security trust fund, which is basically almost broke. In a few years, it'll be empty, and therefore that'll be a real problem. The benefits will have to be cut around 20-30% in order to meet the obligations of the people who are in Social Security in the 2030s. So my proposal is the grand bargain. And I call it the grand bargain because we have to give something up to get something up, and you will be better off for it. That's the whole point. I think the way I calculated, everyone will be better off if they give up their Social Security and Medicare. The people that will still collect Social Security and Medicare, that's why we need a transition period, would be the people who haven't saved during a lifetime and are dependent upon their retirement solely on Social Security. That's about 30% of Social Security recipients don't have any income besides Social Security,
Right.
which when Social Security was established, it said Social Security should not be your only retirement income. It should be part of a three-legged stool. When pensions were available back in 30, 40, 50 years ago, plus your own savings, plus Social Security would give you three income streams in retirement. Now, unfortunately, a lot of people only have one income stream called
Well,
Social
the other thing,
Security.
correct me if I'm wrong here, Murray, and that is when uh, FDR instituted Social Security in 36, it kicked in at 61. I think the average age in America was 62, right? It was
No, it's 65, but the average life expectancy was 62.
right. That's what I
So,
mean. Right. Okay. Okay. Thank you for correcting me. But yeah, we're
yeah.
talking, yeah, which is kind of absurd. I mean, so that means that at that time, very few people would have actually gotten it, right?
Well, sure. The thing is, the famous example is the first recipient of Social Security, Ida Fuller, who paid in $20, and she lived into her 90s, and she collected $20,000 in Social Security payments. So Social Security was a great deal for her because she got in early. She didn't work very long. She put in a very small amount, and she collected a whole bunch of money because she lived to be in her 90s. And remember, Social Security started, the tax was 1% on employees, 1% on employers, and the maximum taxable Social Security was $3,000. So people paid in $30 a year, which came out to what, $6 a week. So it didn't have a big impact on people's living standard. But as time went on and inflation went on, the rate went up, plus the taxable amount went up, and Medicare is taxed on all your income. So wealthy people, I mean, professional athletes who make $10, $20 million a year, they're paying 1.45% as their employer on all their income. Same thing with entertainers, movie stars, what have you. People who are in the higher incomes are paying a fortune in Medicare taxes,
Yeah.
and they're not going to receive that much in benefits when
No.
they retire.
I don't know if you saw this. This was the New York Times, I think maybe about 8-10 years ago. They did a survey of very wealthy people. I don't know if it was like people who had over $50 million of assets. I don't actually remember the figure. And the primary thing these people said is that, you know, why does the government give me all these benefits I simply don't need?
Yeah.
I
Well,
mean,
yeah,
yeah,
what Trump should do, because he said Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid are not going to be touched. What Trump should do is to renounce any Social Security benefits he's getting, because he's 78. I'm sure he's collecting Social Security, and his children should renounce their Social Security benefits. And for that, they wouldn't have to pay taxes on their income. And Warren Buffett, who's 94, he could renounce his Social Security. Michael Bloomberg, the Clintons, anybody who's famous, who is worth $100 million, $10 million or so, could say, we don't want our Social Security, but for that, they will benefit by not having to pay taxes on interest and dividends and
yeah,
their income. We can start the ball rolling by Trump saying, listen, Social Security had good intentions, but it's just financially unsustainable, and therefore I'm not going to take any more Social Security, neither will my children. And I'm asking everyone to voluntarily give up their Social Security who are in the upper income brackets of the country. But my plan is to systematically phase out Social Security and Medicare, so we, the people, finally become financially independent. We're coming up to the 250th anniversary of the Declaration of Independence. That gave us the country political independence. Now we need to finish the American Revolution by getting financially independent. And that means your income is yours. You do with what you please. You save for the future. And then we have the nonprofits to help people in the low income brackets with nonprofit medical centers around the country. So Bill Gates, with his $50 billion foundation, wants to do something great for America. Same thing with the Clintons with their foundation, and Michael Bloomberg with his foundation, and Buffett with his $100 billion plus, and Musk. They should build out thousands of nonprofit health centers that would reduce the Medicaid budget to zero from $900 billion. What greater thing for the American people than to lower the federal expenditures by $900 billion? And then we can chip away at Social Security and Medicare. And before you know it, we'll have a balanced budget around $2-3 trillion. And $4 trillion would be freed up for the American people to invest in America and build up the country.
What is the current federal budget right now? About $7.5 trillion?
It's going to be about that in this fiscal year. For last fiscal year, it was, I think just under $7 trillion, and we had a $1.8 trillion deficit, which means that the American people are unwilling to pay for federal spending. So what does that tell us? It tells us that people want expenditures, but not willing to pay for it. That's like going to the supermarket saying, I want $100 worth of merchandise or goods, but I'm only willing to pay $80 for it. Well, right. You would be considered a kook if you said that. But yet they want the federal government to spend the $7 trillion, but only collect around $5 trillion in taxes, which means that the people really don't believe in all the federal expenditures because they think there's a free lunch coming from the federal government.
Well, there has been a free lunch. That's the problem.
Well, this is what economists have taught the people since the Great Depression, that the government is necessary to spend this money to, quote, stabilize the economy and make sure that we have prosperity. But that's the great myth. And Murray Rothbard wrote a wonderful essay called The Fallacy of the Public Sector, which you can get free online at the Mises Institute. And it's probably one of the best short pieces on criticizing the notion that we need government spending for a robust economy.
All right, but let's get back to your thing about the constitutional crisis and the fact that there's no real stuff in the Constitution other than a couple things that the federal government pays for. All right, I'm going to play devil's advocate here. What about stuff that's more convenient for the federal government to pay for than the states? Do you think that should be done? Or and I'm trying to think of an example here. I can't.
Well, the other point I make is that Trump should be invoking the 10th Amendment, saying if it's not authorized by the Constitution, it's reserved for the people in the states.
And that's exactly what I'm talking about, right?
In other words, government should be closest to the people. If you believe that government can be efficient and cost effective, and it should be done at the local government, either the town, the city, the county. The further a government is away from the people, the less efficient it becomes, the less accountable it becomes. We've seen this now with Doge, with what I call it dog-e, because it's D-O-G-E, so I call it dog-e. You see, all these agencies are spending money. There's no accountability for it because it's not their money. It's the taxpayers' money.
Yeah.
And so that's why we need to downsize the federal government. And if California wants to have a fund to help people out with these fires, they should raise the money from the people in California, not from the rest of the country. If Florida has hurricanes, the people of Florida should take care of it. If the people in the Midwest have tornadoes, they should raise money and through the insurance companies and through other funds that could be raised in order to deal with the damage done from tornadoes. If in Minnesota, if you have a bad snowstorm, people in Minnesota should get together and use their resources to deal with those issues. So the point is, disaster aid should come from local resources, either insurance or self-help groups, nonprofits, what have you, instead of the government trying to be the insurer of last resort.
You just opened the door to this. I have to ask. California is almost certain going to go bankrupt at some point. Should the federal government bail them out?
Absolutely not.
I don't think so either. I don't think so. And I say so. And then what happens?
Well, the point is, then you have to restructure the government, just as companies have to restructure.
Right. But they won't.
Well, this is the this is the conundrum we're facing in this country. We're at the point now where we're probably going to have a major financial crisis because governments are spending more money than they're taking in. And they're unwilling to tell the people, if you want this amount of government, you're going to have to be taxed in order to pay for it. And they're not honest with the American government, with the American people. And the American people are not honest with their representatives saying, hey, we want all these expenditures, and so we want to pay for it. I mean, if Warren Buffett thinks he's undertaxed, then he should send his several $billion and to the federal government. In his recent letter to shareholders, which was published last week, he said he's thrilled that the Berkshire Hathaway pays 5% of the corporate income tax in America, and he said, and then he says the federal government should use that money wisely. Well, that's like telling a nymphomaniac to behave herself if she goes on a submarine. I mean,
Oh, you got the joke going today, Murray.
I mean, this is naive on part of Buffett, who's
Yeah.
been around a long time. I mean, he started investing in the 40s when he was 11 years old.
Right, right.
And so for him to think the federal government is an efficient way of dealing with people's needs, and he calls himself a capitalist, he really doesn't understand the market economy and the nonprofit sector. And his children have foundations; they're nonprofits, and so he and Bill Gates should get together and create all these nonprofits around the country to deal with the low-income people who need medical care. We have one here in Naples called the Neighborhood Health Clinic. They've been operating for 25 years, Jim. Not a penny of taxpayer dollars. It's all through voluntary contributions. That is the model of voluntarism, of philanthropy in America. Right. AOC Correct. And Bernie Sanders think that the federal government is a philanthropic organization. No, it's not. Philanthropy is based upon voluntary contributions, period.
I want to get back to you. We're talking about the fact that like if California needs to balance about it should raise its taxes. But I can make an argument that California and especially like Illinois the people are so taxed so heavily that if you raise the taxes much more, you'd completely destroy the economy anyway, wouldn't you?
Well, here's what's happening. You may have read about this, that there are counties in Illinois that want to secede and join Indiana. There are counties in Washington, Oregon that want to join Idaho.
Right.
So I think we're starting to see people waking up saying, listen, we're being so oppressed by the state government and the counties that we live in. We want to move. We want to associate with more friendly governments. And that is the beauty of, quote, democracy. If you really believe in democracy, then you should have a vote of people deciding what legal jurisdiction they want to be affiliated with or associated with. And I think this could expand all over the country. And I think it would be a wonderful thing for the country for people to say, hey, we want to associate with the government that is most friendly to the people, that believes in limited government, that believes in that's pro-business in their rules and regulations. And I think this could be the next big thing in America. Not so much AI, which is a big thing, but the concept of secession and free association.
I have business people on this program regularly, and there seems to be prevailing theme right now about that the public is that we're almost on the verge of a taxation revolt, just like we were 250 years ago. I mean, people are getting really, really fed up with this, and I think that was part of what happened in November too. You know, it's like no. I mean, your point is well taken. You didn't actually say this, so I'm going to put words in your mouth about the fact that if California wanted to get out of its situation, it should do something different, but it never does, and people never vote differently. But now it seems like people are actually starting to vote differently. Are you getting this impression too?
Well, I think what's happening is that the Democrats are so far left-wing on the cultural issues, on the economy, and also on foreign policy. Ironically, the Democratic Party used to be the pro-peace, anti-war party. Now they're full pro-war. The neocons have taken over the foreign policy of the Democratic Party. And in the Republican Party, you have people like Thomas Massie, Rand Paul, who are more peace, less interventionist or non-interventionist. And so you've got this tug of war going on in the Republican Party. And so Trump says he wants to be a peacemaker. I mean, when was the last time you had a president say that? Actually, it was JFK who said that, that the
And they
foremost,
killed them.
yeah, the foremost responsibility of the federal government is to maintain the peace in
Right.
international relations. And so I think Trump senses that, whether it's intuitive or just from looking around the world and saying all this killing is a disaster in Ukraine and in the Mideast. So we have to applaud him for that. But he should get on national television and explain to the American people what he's doing, why he's doing it, and invoke the Constitution, Article 1, Section 8, and the 10th Amendment. And he says, I've taken an oath to uphold the Constitution, so have members of Congress and the members of the cabinet. We are going to implement the Constitution.
When do you
And
think the 10th Amendment started to be abused? I mean,
good. It was probably I'm trying to think now. Probably early on
and
in
we're going back
American
to
history.
the
I can't cite, but certainly since the Great Depression.
yeah.
I mean, certainly since the New Deal, the Hoover Roosevelt New Deal, because the New Deal began under Hoover. Most people don't know that, and so the 10th Amendment has been basically a dead letter, and there should be some people, and Trump now has the political capital to say, we need to downsize the federal government according to Article 1, Section 8, and the 10th Amendment. And if he has a cogent speech about that, but the problem is he's so obsessed with trade balances that he's undermining his own position about free enterprise.
Uh-huh.
And that's what's really worrisome, because tariffs have always led to conflicts in American history. It gave us the misnamed Civil War, the War for Southern Independence. Tariff was the primary cause of the war, according to several people like Tom DiLorenzo in his 2 books on Lincoln and other people. And tariffs during the 1930s, as nations tried to get out of the Great Depression by cutting off trade with the rest of the world to build up their domestic economies, that led to tension. And that was one of the primary causes of World War II. That's not my opinion. That's Cordell Hull, the Secretary of State under FDR, wrote that in his memoirs. So again, you've got to look at the history of all these major policies and how they impact the economy and international relations and the domestic situations, with Nixon in wage price controls, with Carter in capital controls. And unfortunately, Trump is so obsessed with trade imbalances that he's not getting good advice on this issue. And so for him to say that we are treated unfairly, that America's treated unfairly, well, I don't know what he means by that. If other countries, to get back to your earlier point, are imposing high tariffs or relatively high tariffs on American products, then Trump should say, we're going to not impose tariffs, which are basically taxes on imports, but we are going to make the U.S. economy the freest on earth by reducing regulations to the bone and cutting taxes to the bone. So we will attract capital from around the world. So businesses will want to come here because they'll have a much better economic environment than they will overseas. That's what he should be saying. And if he did that, then I think he wouldn't have to deal with this bludgeon of reciprocal tariffs and other tools that he thinks would be worthwhile in terms of tariffs with other countries.
Murray, I think we'll leave it at that. Thanks for explaining this as always.
Great to be with you again, Jim.
I always love talking to you. So it's like, yeah, thanks. We'll see you soon. Okay. You take care.
Oh, sure will. Thanks.
Thanks. Our thanks to Murray Sabrin. Oh, couldn't hear myself for a second. I guess we're going. Okay. For coming on and explaining all that stuff. Um, I don't think I'm talking out of school here, but off the air, I'm not going to name any names. Murray told me that he actually might have the year of the president. So I'm hopefully maybe we can get an update on from him next time we talk to him on that. So that would be interesting, you know. Now, I would like you guys to call in and talk about anything you want. I'm going to babble on here with some news. The number is 325-225-5546. That's 325 call Jim. You can also send me a text message at 408-458-5088. 408-458-5088. So, okay, what's going on? You probably heard that Gene Hackman, the actor, died, and I'm bringing this up because his death is starting to look increasingly suspicious. Although it appears right now there was no foul play. Let me give you an update of what's going on here. When the police entered his house, they had a call from an outside contractor, construction worker, who happened to look in the window, who was working on his property, and noticed them unresponsive laying on the floor. But he didn't go in. The police went in. So first of all, they said the door was unlocked. So there's that. But there does not seem to be any foul play or any struggle or any of that sort of thing. The weird thing about this, I'm just going to cut the chase here. They found Hackman himself in the living room. They found his wife in the bathroom and the dog in the bathroom. But the really weird thing, and you probably haven't read this, you have to read in between the lines in like the 17th paragraph to get this. There were 2 other dogs in the house. She had 3 dogs, and the other 2 dogs are very much alive and healthy. So the thing is, if it was carbon monoxide poisoning, which is starting to look likely, or was, how come what's with the other 2 dogs? That's usually an all or nothing affair, especially one of them passed. And not only are the other 2 dogs okay, but the police said they were basically full of life. So they were running around. So that's kind of odd. That's weird. So I'll give you an update next time we find out about that. The second thing that's kind of weird, there's a private investigation team that's working that were hired by Thomas Crook's parents. Thomas Crook is the guy who attempted to shoot Trump in Butler, Pennsylvania, and himself got shot. The private investigation team said that they've interviewed more than 100 people, and they are starting to conclude that Crooks did not act alone, or at least that he had I guess that's the same as not acting alone. He had an accomplice. First of all, it turns out, and you probably heard about this was in the news at the time, he had multiple cell phones, and tablets in his possession, but apparently all but one of them didn't belong to him. In other words, he had his personal cell phone, and all the rest of the equipment that he was carrying and they found in his house and all that did not actually belong to him. There's that. And secondly, there's people who said that he had meetings with other people. Who knows where this is going to go. Clay Higgins, the congressman from Louisiana, he has been investigating this himself. He does not believe that Crooks acted with other people. He said one thing that both the private investigators and Higgins said, and that is the FBI has been stonewalling them the entire time. They cannot get any information out of the FBI regarding this, and the FBI has been hindering both of those investigations, the congressional one and the private one. And so that in itself is kind of odd. The private investigation team said there might have even been accomplices, not with guns, not armed. There might have been accomplices on the property at Butler when he actually attempted to shoot. Their theory is that basically Crooks was used by another organization to carry this out because they knew whoever pulled the trigger was going to get shot in 10 seconds, and that's exactly what happened. So, and meanwhile, Crooks's parents basically don't leave the house. They said their neighbors said they go shopping at 3 a.m. And they basically they become hermits, which is sad and terrible, especially because there's no indication that they knew anything about this. And that's the other thing too. Both these teams, no one's ever been able to figure out why he did this. Well, of course, the thing is, well, he's nuts, and I'm going to get to that in just a minute here too. Another story. Yeah, you can't, like if you're nuts, nothing makes sense. So there's that. But there's never been any like whether it's political or he wanted his claim to fame or whatever. No one's ever been able to figure out why he actually did it. And it's been very, there's been, you talk about assassination attempts throughout history. Crooks has kind of gone under the radar in a way. I mean, we all know about Oswald. We all know about, John Wilkes Booth. Well, those people were successful. But okay, so, we know about John Hinckley. He wasn't successful, but we know about him. Well, maybe it's because crooks did get shot in 15 seconds. Maybe, I don't know. Maybe that's the reason. But yeah, it's amazing how little we know about this guy. I mean, he did literally, he came within a centimeter of killing the former president of the United States and current presidential candidate. So that's kind of interesting. Meanwhile, a woman shows up at you got to stay with me here too, because this is really interesting. A woman shows up at a Tesla dealership in Colorado, attempting to blow the place up because she doesn't like Elon Musk. Now, this is the other thing. And who wrote this article? Terry Christoph, who's been on this show for Red State. She wrote this article. I'm going to have her back. We're going to have to talk about this. And she brings this up. She says, well, okay, so doesn't this woman get that the people at the local Tesla dealership have nothing to do with Elon Musk? They buy and resell his cars. That's what they do, but no, she's going to blow up the Tesla dealership because she doesn't like Musk. And then on top of that, the real kicker of this story, the press is reporting that this woman did this, but it's not a woman. It's a transgender woman. It's a man. And that went completely under the radar because the mainstream press basically just said a woman, and then they started to publish her picture, and the picture doesn't look like a woman. It doesn't. I mean, this is getting ridiculous. And I have to, at this point, I have to bring this up because this is, in fairness, and you have to know my position on this, but I've said this many times. If you don't listen to the show, transgenderism is real, but the vast majority of people who think they have it are mentally ill. And you basically have to be a psychiatrist to know who's real and who's pretending. And I'm not talking about literally pretending, although it's become pretty obvious now that in prisons in the United States, that the vast majority of men who say they're claiming to be women are pretending. That's a different categorization. So you have people who are flowing around who are legitimately. I know one legitimate transgender person. I do, and this person had a sex change from a female to a male. Is way happier for it. I mean, this is one of those things where if you knew this person, that this is one of those rare times where God made a huge mistake. And there's no doubt about it. I'm very happy I'm not friends with this person, but I'm acquaintances with them. I see them a few times a year at social functions. This is, I mean, to me, I'm glad I have this man in my life now because I've learned, it proves to me that transgenderism is real. So I know that. But that said, like I said, and even if you include the people who think they're transgender and aren't, it's still a tiny minority of the population. I mean, what are we talking? We're probably talking about 1/1000th of 1% of the American population. It's ridiculous. So now, and I don't have to be I'm not the only person who said this. The problem is the transgender movement is getting increasingly militant. Now they look at this thing about not being able to play in women's sports with the men, the transgender women not being allowed in women's sports. They look at that as an affront to their liberty. I would disagree. It's like, to me, that's just, this is where, you have the right to live your life any way you want. But when it comes up, you're butting up against the rights of other people. Well, then you've got a problem. But Any rate, so anyway, yeah, the woman who tried to blow up the Tesla dealership isn't a real woman. So any rate, so yeah, so you get down to the thing, like why do people do shit? Because they're crazy. I don't know, you know. Meanwhile, we've talked about this before. Trust in the American media is at an all-time low, but here's how low it is. This is a Gallup poll, if I'm right. And I left this open here on my control panel so I can actually get the figures. So since 2017, Republicans' lack of trust in the media is now over 50%. Democrats, it's only 6%. Democrats trust the mainstream media. This is the kicker. For independents, it's at 42%. Independents. So you basically now the public has given up. They don't want to have anything to do with the media anymore. And so Joy Reid gets fired by MSNBC, and she's whining and bitching and moaning, and Rachel Maddow says it's racist and all this other stuff. And I'm sorry, I can't remember who wrote this column. I read the last couple of days, said, no, you have to understand her ratings were bad. It's a business, and she had 5 years to prove herself. And not only did she not prove herself, her ratings went down over that period of time. She had terrible ratings, and it was a business decision, and that's that. And here's the deal. That's once again, and I didn't actually. I'm making this in my head. I'm making a connection here, talking about reality. You can, if you want to live your life, if you're a man and want to live your life as a woman, you have the right to do that. There's not a problem, but it doesn't make you a woman. It doesn't. And the same thing with you can talk about racism, you can talk about unfairness, all sorts of stuff. You're not making ratings, man. It's not happening, and it's a business. You can't. And also now, meanwhile to this, Carolyn Levitt gave a interview. She's the current the new Trump press secretary with a podcast, and saying that she thinks one of the problems that the left-leaning media is having is the fact that the people in the Trump administration are having so much fun. That's what she says. She says they're having a blast. And also, you can't, it's hard to argue with this. Trump is, right now, this is the most transparent presidential administration in history. In like the first month, Trump took over 1,000 questions from the press, completely unplanned and unscripted. He didn't necessarily answer all of them, but I'll take them all. And she's doing the same thing. Although she's got a little bit of balls there. I got to give her credit. She's at the podium in the press room, and so then there's another thing. There's another side here too. And so I don't know if you saw this, and maybe this is inside baseball, so maybe you don't know or don't care. But I find this kind of interesting, and that is Levitt announced a couple days ago that from henceforth, up till now, the Washington Press Association, what's it called? The White House Press Association has determined who gets in the press briefing room for official press briefings and where they sit. And generally, the people who sit up front get to ask the most questions. And right now, that's like Fox News, NBC, CBS, AP. They sit in the front. This whole thing started because the president has now banned the Associated Press from the press room, and they are suing him because they claim he's infringing on their First Amendment rights. I don't know about that per se, but anyway, they're suing him. But the thing is, it's not only there's that, they control who sits in the entire room. They control who gets in the room. And Levitt has said they are no longer going to honor the Press Association's request. They are going to determine who gets in the room because they are trying to give seats to alternative media, which is not a bad thing. I'm not the only person I don't know if this is the reason Trump won, but one thing he did somebody said in an article a couple of days ago that Barron Trump turned out to be smarter than all the consultants that the Democrats had regarding dealing with the media, because he told his dad, you got to go on these podcasts. And that, I don't know if that was the difference. I don't think it was, but it certainly made a difference. You know, I mean, he went on Joe Rogan and talked off the top of his head for 3.5 hours, and Kamala couldn't be bothered to do that. So at any rate, so yeah, oh, geez, picture froze. Hold on a second. Well, I know how to fix this now. Hello? Hello? This is not good, man. Jesus. Hello? Hello? Oh, man. Hello? Okay. Well, that's great. That's fantastic. Now we don't have a picture. Now we got a freaking radio show with a still picture. That's terrific. This is not good. This has happened a couple times before now in the last couple weeks. So, that's too bad too. I had a bunch of other stuff I was going to talk about. Okay, well, I tell you what, folks, we're gonna end this for tonight then. Okay, so now next week on Tuesday we have Marcus Loth from UFO Insight magazine. He's gonna be joining us on Wednesday. Jeff Meyer. On Thursday we should have the show because I'm pretty certain we got a guest. So I just haven't confirmed it. So anyway, I'm sorry about this. I don't know what's going on here. I got to get this. I got to get this figured out. We got a little bug in the system somewhere. This is so complex. What's going on here is ridiculous. So let me try one more time. Yeah. Okay. All right. So we're gonna call in tonight. Okay. So yeah, we'll be back on Tuesday. I hope you guys have a nice weekend. I'm Jim Peters. I want to thank you for watching. Good night, Esperanza. Good night, Uncle Donnie. And good night to you wherever you are. Sorry about the problem. Have a nice weekend, folks. We'll see you on Tuesday night. Take care.